Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Halfway to Healing. I'm Sharna.
And I'm Sam. I don't know why I clapped. That's going to be a pain in audio editing. And I'm Sam. Today we're talking about something at the very heart of this podcast, and that's lived experience. You've probably heard that phrase a lot, especially in mental health and or advocacy spaces. But what does it really mean to live through someone and then to try and put it into words?
For us, lived experience isn't just a story. It's memory, emotion, survival, and sometimes even a complete rewrite of what we were told was true. It's navigating health systems that don't believe us, relationships that misunderstood us, and the quite messy work of figuring out who we are.
In this episode, we're going to be sharing moments where our lived experiences changed how we saw ourselves, how we show up for others, and why our stories, and also your stories as a listener, matter. Whether you've been silenced, dismissed, or are just starting to find your voice, we really hope this conversation reminds you that your experience is valid and that it's something worth sharing in your own time and on your own terms.
So we are very glad you're here, and let's get right on into it.
Oh, lived experience. I know I lost my thought.
That's so fine.
I just lost it.
Train of thought.
It just emptied in my brain. I guess I think it'll help define what lived experience is for each of us. I know everybody has such different understandings of these things, and I think having a kind of definition individually but also a joint definition for what we'll be talking about could be really beneficial.
Yeah.
So what's lived experience mean to you?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Oh gosh, how do you even begin to explain it? Essentially the term does, in my mind, sort of define it, but just having your own experiences that you have gone through, that you feel valid and that are true, not being dismissed. Your experiences are very valid, no matter how seemingly big or small they may be. What about you?
I very much agree. I separate it much, especially in the recovery space, as lived experience recovery and then clinical recovery. And I think it's a lot easier to define clinical recovery and treatment, where, medical settings, doctors, appointments, and all of that. Lived experience to me is more a conversation. What did one person go through? And finding elements of that story that resonate with me and mine to give me hope, that's the big thing, it's hope. I know, for me, my introduction to lived experience was through my eating disorder recovery, where I was here, I think I talked about this in one of the previous episodes. I had spent so long in clinical treatment for my eating disorder, and it wasn't really working. I was constantly relapsing. I couldn't get my shit together, really. And when I found a lived experience space, it gave me that hope that this is not going to be some spiral that I keep going through. It's not a carousel that I have to keep. I'm not there is an exit. There is hope. There is recovery. There is something beyond what I'm experiencing now. So that's kind of what lived experience is to me. And I know it's a little bit more it's a bit more general. Everybody has experiences, everybody's lived things, but it's definitely got that more. It gives me hope hearing people's stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was very well put, Sam. And I really liked how you touched on with regards to your eating disorder recovery, hearing those lived experiences really helped you. Like, I know, especially, like, for me personally, I have always had this sort of feeling of not inadequacy, but not being quite valid in my eating disorder, because I had in my mind this very, I want to say, very stereotypical eating disorder mindset. Like, you picture the very white, emaciated female in hospital. I was never, in my case, I was not hospitalized. And so for me, that has always sort of, my eating disorder has always quite held on to that. And then getting into a space like where we met, where primarily a lot of the focus is on these lived experiences, hearing that, no, not everyone with an eating disorder is emaciated. Eating disorders are not, like, sure, physical symptoms can be a side effect, but it is a mental health condition. You can never tell just by looking at someone if they have an eating disorder, and really hearing those experiences of people and hearing more that, no, not everyone is hospitalized. Only a very small amount are.
And I mean,
just heard the dog in the background.
I think, I mean, even myself, that I was hospitalized many times for my eating disorder, and even I held on to that I'm not sick enough.
Exactly. It's such a
even I still had that mindset, and I was very much the picture that you just painted, like that. But even with that appearance, where I see, like, there's not many of them, but I see old pictures of me from my eating disorder, and I'm like, how did nobody pick up that I was sick? Because, like, actually yesterday I popped up on my Snapchat memories, actually, I'm in hospital for something else, like, unrelated, and I was like, I looked so sick.
So ill.
And I was, and that point of that memory was still 9 months before I was diagnosed. And so when I went into the space where we met, it was very much like hearing people talk about the different presentation, and all in a recovery for like focused language. Was so empowering for me, where it's like, okay, I'm not the only one who didn't get this picked up on forever. And being able to hear those stories, and I don't know if you felt this way, but it just gave me hope that that's not how I had to live my life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, you go.
No, I was just saying,
just hearing all these different experiences and finally hearing one that I felt sort of was like, okay, I can relate to that. And then seeing this person that is recovered and, like you said, giving you that hope, like finding something you can relate to, and then seeing this recovered person with these same experiences as you go through what you went through and come out the other end of it is very, very inspiring.
Thank you. It's funny we're talking about this, because you don't know this yet, but I was looking at my like recovery app that I use for my sobriety and I use for my eating disorder, and I actually am 11 months recovered from my eating disorder. Like, I'm 11 months clean from my eating disorder behaviors. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you're coming up 9 months sober as well?
9.5
or have you already
sober.
passed that?
I just passed 9 months sober.
Oh, that is incredible.
But a lot of that...
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I'm really proud of me too. But a lot
you should be.
Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of that is from hearing other people's stories, both other sober people, other people who have recovered from, and I think I definitely one of my goals is to help share that story, like with this podcast, is to share that story so that other people who might not have access to a clinic, well, it's not a clinic, but like a place like you and I had where we could do that, but you know, across the world, I was looking at the statistics on the website, and there's people from America looking at the site, like, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, which I think is really cool and nifty.
That is so cool.
You know, but yeah, and I think there's something about, for my story, I spent, like, because before I got to the lived experience recovery, I spent 3 years in clinical treatment.
Wow.
Yeah. And admittedly, some of that was I had a massive reluctance. This is specific to my eating disorder. I had a massive reluctance. I thought I wanted to get better. Like, I would have conversations with my psychologist, and my psych would be like, I don't think you're there. I don't think you're ready to change. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I come to these appointments. I do what I need to do. Of course I'm ready. And looking back at
it, sort of like telling them what you think they want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was doing all the time. Like, if I do the right things and say the right things, maybe people will back off, and I can just keep living my life the way that I thought I wanted to live it at the time. And don't get me wrong, it was necessary to save my life. I would, like I said, I was incredibly, incredibly sick. And not even just from the eating disorder, but, like, you know, my addictions, my, you know, I very much mistreated my body, and my mind. It wasn't until I started hearing other people's stories that I was like, actually, I can do this. And this is important to know. I needed clinical treatment. I needed to I needed to do that again to save my life. Because I think lived experience does have, like, an onus of, you need to have, at least for me, I needed to have some level of motivation to keep going. And I didn't have that for the 3 years I was in clinical treatment. But I remember my last hospital stay before I went into lived experience recovery, it was like a penny dropped. Like, I remember so clearly, I was sitting in the hospital bed, and I was like, I don't want to go in circles anymore. Because I had been, like, I'd do 2-3 weeks in the hospital, I'd get out, I'd start the, like, behaviors all over again, and then in a couple of weeks I'd be right back in the hospital, and it was just this awful cycle. And I hate hospitals. For any reason, I hate hospitals. But even though I had so many admissions, a lot of the build up before then, I would have to go to the emergency department 3, 4, 5 times and be like, no, you don't understand. I cannot. If you send me home right now, I will not be alive for much longer. And basically repeatedly knock on the door and be like, I need help. I know I need help. I cannot help myself. But there was this penny that dropped in one of my admissions where I was like, oh, I'm so sick. If I don't do something, this is just going to be my life forever. And that was so powerful to me. And I did, and I contacted the place where we met, and like, all of these things that I then did, because I then had that internal motivation to listen to the stories, to, you know, to get myself out of that, for lack of a better term, hole that I was living in. But yeah, it's just insane to me how hearing other people's stories can be so powerful.
Yeah. And something I love so much about where we met is the connection. Everyone has their own experience with this. And, you know, everyone's experience is going to be different. And then you might find certain things that you relate to. And even though it's not necessarily spoken about, you know, like, there are very much rules in the place where we met that are in place, and that those rules are there for a very good reason. But even though it's not necessarily talked about in that sense, everyone just gets it. And you can be, someone can say, oh, I haven't had the greatest time. Everyone is very acknowledging of that and self-aware. And I love that part of being in a group of like lived experience people. Just that connection is very helpful and important.
Oh,
For
absolutely.
me, yeah.
No, I very much agree, and I've met so many amazing people from that, and connected with so many people. Just people I don't think I ever would have connected with in any other way, and being able to connect with, so like, you know, you and I, we have so many things in common, and like outside of our eating disorder, you know, we both love music. You know, we're both really creative people. I know you constantly share your art with me, which, as you know, I love. I love art. I love creating our pets, and the group that we met in was a more laid back group than some of the others. That we had that chance to get to know each other. It was like we were all here because we have this shared lived experience, but I don't even know, like, it would have been months when we actually talked about it. And I think it was more in a setting boundaries way than it, you know, to be like, hey, no, we need to maintain the other parts of our lives. And I think because that group was so much more focused on hobbies and interests and who we are, that it definitely gave me an outlet and the acknowledgement that, oh yeah, I am so much more than just my eating disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I wonder, like, I mean, this is like, you know, a very much a lived experience podcast. That's the point of it. Now I know, because if anybody knows me outside of this podcast, I also run a business, and story is so important. Sharna, you'd know because you do my socials.
You very much advocate for that.
But I know there's like there are some boundaries I put in place around sharing my story. Like in different settings, I wonder like how you navigate, okay, what is something that I feel comfortable sharing? To what just extent do you share that? Like, I wonder how you kind of navigate that.
Sorry, my mind just blanked. Could you repeat that?
I'm just like, obviously there are like, this goes on the internet. There is, you know, there's gonna be boundaries that you've set I'm assuming that there are boundaries that you've set internally as to what you're okay with sharing, how you might share that. I can explain my own thoughts if that would help you.
Yeah, no, you explaining it like that, I think I got a bit more of an idea. I know when we were thinking of starting this up, I approached you and I was like, hey, is it okay while we're still sort of getting into things if we don't necessarily show too much of our faces? And because that was something I was a little bit uncomfortable, and you were able to adapt to that very quickly. And we talked about how in the future I might feel a bit more comfortable with that. Obviously, I understood that you were more comfortable with like your face being out there, having your own business and stuff. But I feel like I'm quite a bit of a private person. Like all my, you know, social medias are on private. I don't really engage in very much outgoing activities, I feel like. So I very much quite value my privacy, and I think it might be part of my own, not insecurity, but just what I am comfortable with at the moment. And I know we talked about how in the future that might change, and I'm so grateful you were able to adapt. We've made these little cartoons of ourselves. So, you know, it sort of shows, and like obviously showing what we look like on this podcast is not the goal, but you know, sometimes people want a bit of an idea what we look like, and that's sort of a bit what we look like, but giving people a bit of an idea, you know, without necessarily always showing our whole selves. And there was something else I was going to mention. but I have since forgotten. So I will turn it over to you, and it might come back to me while you're talking.
I know for me, like with this, it was very important to me. I kind of use, like where we met, I use a lot of those guidelines, like, you know, recovery focused language. You've probably noticed, like, I'm very, like, I'll talk about the eating disorders in terms of like, this is just a behavior, but not explain what those behaviors are.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, having that recovery focused language is very important to me because I am definitely, I mean, I've been sharing my story online very publicly for a while. And I know when I started doing that, that was fucking terrifying for me, which is why I wanted to accommodate what you were comfortable with and why I was more than happy, you know, to not have our faces on. Or, you know, however that's accommodating for you, because I remember how I felt back, like when I started doing this. And I mean, I've gotten to a point where I've now written an entire memoir, and I'm looking at publishing it.
So excited for that.
But I've learned in that process that, you know, I started sharing snippets, but the how it was perceived, how it was received by, especially in the business community, and I know this isn't the business community, but when I was starting out, I was really scared because I thought everybody wanted a business person and a contractor to be this perfect, totally well-rounded go-getter, and I'm like, I can't always be that person. But the way that it was received, you know, when I started opening up about my own story, and I am still careful with what I say. I know it took a really long time for me to talk openly about being an addict, because there is a lot of stigma around someone with an eating disorder, someone with addiction issues, someone with chronic health. Like, not everybody gets it. But
there's always going to be that stereotype.
Yeah, but something I realized is they're not people that I want to have in my life anyway. So, you know, when it comes to this podcast, my main boundaries around what I talk about is just making sure that it's recovery focused. You know, you would have noticed in previous episodes there are, you know, trigger warnings at the beginning of the episodes, including timestamps of when we're talking about these topics, because my goal is to foster recovery here. And I feel, you know, if I got into my behaviors, if I got into all of that, I don't feel like that would be fostering that recovery.
No, not at all. And I know, especially, not so much now, but I know when we were first sort of like, I guess, starting our friendship. Yeah, that's the word. We very much had in place certain boundaries, like not much eating disorder talk. And I now feel like we're a bit more, like, we still don't really talk about, like, you know, numbers, behaviors and stuff. But I feel like we've progressed in our friendship where we're able to sort of we don't really talk about it that much, but we sort of understand and help each other. And I'm able to acknowledge that if we were able to go more, if we did go more in depth about ourselves, given how competitive eating disorders are, I know that would not be helpful for us. And that is, I don't know about you, but that is definitely not something I want.
No,
us.
I don't want that.
I don't want to be competing with you.
I don't want to be competing with you either. No, and I think, you know, it's so important, especially when, I'm a pretty carefree person. You know that not much offends me. Not a lot gets under. I've got a bit of a thick skin.
You do,
and I know, you know, we crack jokes, but I'm still human at the end of the day. And you know, having boundaries with anyone, and I know I'm very protective as well. Like, I know sometimes when you come to my house, my mum and my parents are a little bit not so great with the boundaries, and I'll like jump in and be like, shush. Stop talking. This is not a helpful conversation.
Yeah.
Because I get a little protective of my friends as well, where I'm like, you know, I'm not always good at recognizing it in me and being able to shut it down for myself. But when, you know, my friends are there and I'm like, that's not going to be helpful for anybody here in this room. But I think boundaries are so important, and especially in lived experience spaces, it's important to have those boundaries because, like you said, you don't want it to get competitive and be like, oh, well, this person was like this and I wasn't, and I need to be like that to be valid, or, you know, and I know that's like definitely feelings I've had before. But yeah, lived experience is so interesting to me.
It is. It really is.
Was there anything else that you kind of wanted to touch on today?
I think I would love to just briefly touch on, like, sort of working through, I guess, feeling shame or like self-silencing yourself. Like, I know I have recently been diagnosed with something new, and I was hesitant at first to tell you. And you have been so amazing with it, so helpful. So even though you personally can't relate to it, it's something that I feel like is not quite talked about. And so the fact just having you to listen was very, almost quite like warming for me, because I feel like there is a bit of a stigma around this. It is not talked about. And while I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet, I have suggested the idea to you that in a later episode, I would love to talk about this new, I guess, condition diagnosis. And it's only been sort of very recently that I've felt more comfortable with it and not feeling as much shame and being more comfortable talking to people about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've said this to you in, like, not this space, but in like personal, is because I very much understand the shame of things, you know, like with, like, for ages, I did not want anybody to know how much I was drinking. Like I was like, this is, if anybody knew what I was doing, then I would feel they would judge me. They would, you know, all of these things. And my goal with especially with my friends, but really anybody that I interact with, is that I try to be a safe, judgment-free space.
Yeah.
I always have, I always will, because one, chances are I've done it. Chances are I've been through it or done something equally, if not more stupid. So firstly, I'm not really in a position to judge, because listening to my history of shit that I've done, I'm not, talk about hypocritical. But also, I also understand how important it is. Like, I've been dismissed. I've been, by friends, doctors, I've been dismissed so much. And the last thing I would want, and I think it would be so out of character for me, is if I didn't extend the empathy, the sympathy, the acknowledgement that sometimes life is absolute shit.
Yeah.
You know, and even if I can't relate to it, or I don't understand, I do everything in my power to at least make you not feel like you have to go through it alone.
Yeah.
Because I've gone through so many things alone. You know, I've done so much on my own, and I know I felt miserable. I know that I felt shame. I know that I felt it was just awful. And if I can extend a little bit of a hand to anybody in my life, you know, hold that hand out and just walk with you through it, then that's all I need to do as a friend.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, as a friend, as a partner, as a, you know, as anyone, you know, a colleague, a contract, like anyone, because I think the worst thing in life is to walk it alone.
Exactly. And I think sometimes, even if you can't necessarily offer anyone help, it just wants someone to listen, you know?
Yeah.
Give, like you said, giving that hand. Just want someone to listen, to be heard.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want anybody. I have done so much of my life completely alone and had to figure things out all by myself. And it is genuinely miserable. You know, there have been times when I've been in hospital and no one has visited. No one has checked in. No one has, you know, even sent me a text to be like anything. And that's awful, you know? Yeah. So I just want to make sure that all of my friends know that even if I can't fix it, because chances are I can't fix it, but I can listen and I can, you know, get you a cup of coffee or just sit with you. I mean, I love body doubling. You know how much I love body doubling. Like, I can sit in the room and do my own thing just so that you're not alone.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's all someone needs as well.
Yeah. Because, I genuinely think the worst thing in life is to walk it alone.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm glad that I make you feel less alone with things.
You really do. And hopefully I do too.
I also feel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I also feel that because I'm so open about my life with you, you know, even more than I am on social media and stuff, I'm so open. I feel like it leaves, you don't have to walk through it, but it leaves that door open for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, I've definitely felt more comfortable sharing certain things with you because you are so open and non-judgmental.
Yeah, because you can ask me anything about anything.
Yeah.
Right?
You're an open book.
I am an open book to you. Like, and to all of my friends, like, I just kind of, I don't have the energy to filter things.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't have it in me to not
You don't,
to hide. So I'm glad that that you feel that I've left that door open for you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that so much.
And I never expect you to, like, there's no expectation for you to walk through it. It's just there if you need.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add? Anything else?
No, I think that's it for me. I think that's a good way to wrap.
Yeah.
You know, if anyone's wondering how they can support their friends, you know, just listen, you know, offer to be there.
Yeah.
Anything that I kind of just said, really, you know, but obviously within your capacity. Like, I know not everyone has the capacity to be an open book. But I know it, like, whatever's within your capacity, whether that's to send a message or, you know, call for 5 minutes or knock on their door and be like, hey, I brought you coffee, a muffin, and some time with me.
Yeah.
You know, I think, that's always good. But I think that was good. A good wrap on lived experience. Yeah. And do you want to talk about the next episode?
Ooh, sure. So next episode, we are going to be talking about friendships and how we go about navigating those during. So it's mostly, I guess, going to be sort of, you're going to have a bit more experience. And we're going to be talking about what it's like having to cancel, and you with like flare-ups with your lupus, and how we navigate that. More so you, though sometimes me, sometimes I am just like not feeling it. But yeah, that's what next episode's going to be like.
Yeah, and as always, my social
A little
spiel.
spiel.
Follow,
Love the
like,
spiel.
comment. We have an Instagram. We have a website that we're on YouTube. Oh, pardon me. All of this goes out on everything. And all of the links are in the description. So, yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.